It's that time of the week. If you're a football fan, if you're a soccer fan, it's the World Football Phone-In on 5 Live. 08085 909 693. That's the number you need to speak to our two men on a mission to answer your calls this morning. John Arnold, come in, please.
Hello, hello.
Good to have you with us as ever. And Tim Vickery, Legendino, good evening, good morning.
Very good morning to you. I think, Seth, I'm not entirely sure, but I think you kind of skipped over Desican's surname just before the news. Can you confirm or deny these rumours?
You say the full name first time, and that's it.
That's one. That's enough. That's all right. Fair enough.
So you're going to be just Tim for the rest of the programme, okay?
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, 3 letters. We can all manage that.
Sometimes.
Before a few sherbets, anyway.
Look, loads of football stories for us to discuss over the next little bit from the various parts of the world. You're going to be focusing on South America as ever, Tim. John, you're charged with North America and the CONCACAF region. Quick question to the pair of you first, though. News breaking here on the BBC about the fact that Chelsea willing to match that £75 million offer for Romelu Lukaku. First of all, a quick thought on whether or not it's going to be a worthwhile signing for either of those clubs. But it did lead me to think about the things that you've allowed to leave your life and you really would like to buy them back at whatever cost. Tim.
Doesn't that make you think about ex-girlfriends and stuff?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I think it's almost a human reaction. You know, after you've thrown something away, can I have it back again, please? You're closer to this story than we are, and I suppose from a Chelsea point of view, and the big question hanging over here is what on earth has gone on between the coach and Diego Costa, a relationship that seemed to be patched up. It seemed to work very successfully during the course of last season, but what on earth, Seth, has gone on there between the two of them?
Well, it's interesting. I spoke to Michael Ballack about this, former Chelsea player, former German captain, 2-3 weeks ago. And he was saying to me that at every single club you have players who are difficult to handle. And he says, no doubt, Diego Costa is a difficult player to handle. He says, but if you're in a Champions League semi-final, if you're in a Champions League final, Diego Costa is the kind of player that can change the game for you. So you have to find a way to deal with him. And also, you have to say to him a little bit, look around world football right now. Where are you going to go that's going to allow you to play on the stage and at the same time earn the money that you're going to earn here at Chelsea? You can go to China and you can earn oodles of money, but you're not going to get the chance to play in a Champions League semi-final. You're not going to get a chance to win the Premier League, the FA Cup, whatever. And he kind of felt that Chelsea maybe had to be a little bit stronger in the way that they were dealing with Diego Costa, because in the end,
perhaps you don't want him to marry your daughter, do you?
No,
that's not what he's there for.
Absolutely not. He has to be somebody that, in the end, if he scores you 20, 25 goals, then he's done you a good job. But I think it's an interesting conversation piece. But it's one I'm going to let you both think about. John, players that have departed that you would like to have back, I'll get you to give us an answer or two to that as we go on throughout the course of the World Football Phone-In. Big stories in North America over the last 7 days, John?
Well, we just tonight have had the start of the Gold Cup, the Continental Championship, so that's drawing a lot of attention. Who will be supreme in CONCACAF, although Mexico, the United States, and even Panama have brought alternative sides, not their best teams necessarily. So we'll see who's able to win that. And also Juan Carlos Osorio, the Mexico coach, as much as he would like to be on the bench for Mexico, looking over his alternate side, seeing what depth prospects he has, he will not be able to, given a 6-game ban by FIFA for his actions toward the fourth official in that third place game when he felt that Mexico should have had a penalty in extra time. It wasn't given. The tape isn't entirely clear if he sort of nudged the fourth official with his shoulder, but certainly in the FIFA charges said verbally aggressive toward an improper conduct. So he's out. He won't be at the Gold Cup, but plenty of players worth watching will be.
Okay, John, we're going to continue with the Gold Cup. That's our subject to kick us off on the phone lines tonight. 08085 909 693. Good morning, Cleo.
John, and good morning, Tim. Yes, it's the Gold Cup starting, well, literally today. The first match was Canada. They had a good win against French Guiana. They won that 4-2. And I think it's Honduras and Costa Rica playing next. That's Group A. Group B is the USA, Panama, and Mauritius. But I've all posted it. It's all on our wonderful Facebook page. But I just wanted to... How do they pick these teams? Because Mexico have just been playing in the Confederations Cup. They last Saturday for the third place. Didn't get it. Portugal got it. But how do they pick it? Is it a mixture of both? And Tim, when you're coming over to UK, come to the Emirates. We've got a fantastic pre-season trophy, and you might see our new boy we just bought. But I wonder when he was coming over, because this year marks 20 years of World Football Phone-In, and we should have a 4-hour special while Tim's here. But
I couldn't agree with you more, and of course it'd have to be cake. If we're going to do 20 years, we're going to have a party, there has to be cake. We'll come to Tim in a second, but John, how are they picking the teams then for the Gold Cup?
Well, Mexico specifically took their essentially 23, best players, the top squad to the Confederations Cup. Now, CONCACAF rules say you can't announce that your team going to the Gold Cup is not the best. But everyone knows that for Mexico it's not. So you see it's a side that's mostly based with domestic players, a lot of young players, and some veterans who maybe have been overlooked in the past. You look at a center back, Jair Pereira, he's in his 30s, but just won a championship with Chivas, a player who, deserves some national team credit, even though he's not able to break into Mexico's top team. So it's an alternative group. There's a couple players, especially young players. There's a left back, Luis Reyes, and a few other players who are on Mexico's Confederations Cup roster, and the clubs were willing to let Mexico have them at both tournaments. So he'll play at both. Edson Alvarez is a 19-year-old who was just at the Confederations Cup to watch, train, see how the top team does it. He's going to be in the Gold Cup and could see action too. So it's mostly a completely different roster, and that's why this tournament's really testing Mexico's depth, and why I think, for me, they might not be the favorite to win this tournament, which is rare in CONCACAF, because generally any tournament you look and it's Mexico, the United States, and everyone else. This time with Costa Rica bringing everyone except for Keylor Navas, Celso Borges, I think the Ticos might have a very good chance of lifting the trophy. But that's sort of how it's done in the U.S. in the same way, giving some players rest ahead of a difficult season in this kind of off-year Gold Cup. In 2 years, most teams will bring their best, bring their strongest teams. But this time around, it's a lot of young faces, a lot of new players, and an opportunity for coaches to see just how deep their roster is.
Who's your pick, Cleo?
Well, I would have gone for Mexico, but I fancy Costa Rica. They did very well they were in our group in the World Cup back in 2014, and we know how far they went.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much further than we did.
Cleo, thank you. Tim, I've got to throw the question back at you. Cleo says 20 years since the start of the World Football Phone-In. There has to be a party. There has to be a 4-hour special. When are you back in the UK, Tim?
Yeah. I'm around for just over 3 weeks. And hopefully we'll be up in Salford for one of the 3 times. Yeah, we're coming up. You're making a happy man very old. Up now to 20 years when it started in December of 1997. So we've been here a long, long time.
Unbelievable, and still, it's a terrible line to Rio. That's just the way these things go. Get your calls in right now, 08085 909 693. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Good morning, Seth. Good morning, Tim. And can I actually just say what a virile and powerful name John actually has over...
Well, there you go, John.
Okay, maybe self-serving.
I feel a little bit like that Tim and I are at a party we shouldn't be at right now.
Okay, no, nothing of that sort. What I actually wanted to ask, basically, there are some rules of football that I actually do want to be changed. Quite frankly, I don't like the fact that simulation often actually is treated differently in various countries and various different leagues. I don't like the offside rule having been changed. I used to actually understand it. I'm now not completely absolutely sure when something's offside. And I don't like the fact that you actually can't pass back to the goalkeeper currently. are there any rules that you actually would like to have changed?
John, seeing as this is for the John Club, you can answer this one first.
Yeah, I'm with you on the offside. I think that a lot of times, the active man is sort of a misleading term. I've seen several goals given, even in the past few months, where there's a player who's in an offside position and he doesn't touch the ball, but to me he's very much active if he's drawing the attention of the goalkeeper. So at least I would like a clarification or something, because I don't think it's fair for a player to be in a goalkeeper's face, and just because he doesn't touch the ball means he's not involved in the play, because for me he very much is. That's one I would definitely change. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I like football the way it is in some respects. I'm sure that Tim has a bit of a differing opinion than me, but I like what VAR has done, although it was a disaster at the Confederations Cup. I like the idea of it, I guess. So maybe, maybe some more technology to assist the referees, but also to assist the fans in understanding what the referees are looking at and why they're looking at it, I think would go a long way toward helping the technology help everyone watching the game, not just seemingly the referees in a TV booth. I think that would go a long way. So that's what I'll say. I'd like to see the offside rule at least clarified, or maybe switched back to where the active man isn't relevant. And I'd also like to see increased technology, even as we kind of go through the growing pains of what we've decided on for the technology for now.
Tim?
Yeah, I think that I'm in favour in limited terms of the video technology coming in with the referee, but I think where we are with it at the moment does show the dangers of tinkering around, because it's not easy. In general terms, I'm a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of fella, and I also think that massive strides have been made in the quality of refereeing. Just to give you one example, the 1974 World Cup final. This is the World Cup final. You get a referee that is an English referee, Jack Taylor, and he's got two linesmen there that aren't linesmen, they're referees, and certainly in the case of one of them, and maybe both of them, don't speak English, so don't speak the same language as the referee, and don't usually work with him. It's a shambles, absolute shambles. On that occasion, Jack Taylor, and they had to improvise something. So I think it was a Dutch player, got booked in that game because the linesman saw something off the ball and just wrote down on a piece of paper the number of the shirt and the colour of the shirt, and that was enough. He showed that to the referee, and Jack Taylor went across and booked him. They'd improvised a system of communication. And nowadays, there's no need for that, because you get teams of referees operating together. And as there is more global cooperation, I think those differences that John referred to in the application of laws on nations and so on, I think over time they will be reduced as criteria is standardised on a global basis. I can't see any problem with not passing back to the goalkeeper. You're forcing then the goalkeeper to be a footballer as well. So it means that a team these days is made up of 11 players and not 10 players and a goalkeeper. The one aspect of the rules where I would like to see something done is players going to ground and time wasting. Now, this is a really tricky one, because the idea of medical attention being available to the player is absolutely fundamental. So when a player goes down, you need to have medical attention onto the pitch to help. This is being abused on too many cases. Players who are going to get substituted when their side's ahead, they go to ground, and a substitution that should take 10 seconds ends up taking 3 minutes, because you got to get the chariot on to wheel him off. It's especially true in the case of goalkeepers going to ground. Any side that wants to waste time, it's the goalkeeper going to ground, and there seems to be at the moment no way around that. I would like there to be serious thoughts on that, because football is a game which is all about rhythm, and these interruptions disrupt the flow of the rhythm. You get the time on at the end, but you cannot replace the rhythm.
But surely the easy thing here, Tim, is you just tell the physios, go on, you see your guy go down, go on and deal with him. And that then cuts out the fake injuries, because you don't have to stop the game. Let everyone play on around.
play on around them. I can see that leading to all kinds of controversy with the ball striking physios and so on. Blimey, just thinking about what that might lead to in South American club football. Physio score. And we've had cases here of physios kicking the ball off the line. And then kind of running away celebrating. So you bring them on the field while play is in progress. I think it's not going to end up well.
But it does work in other sports. You look at rugby union, for example, and I take the point it's very, very different. But then there's an injury, and the support staff go straight out there, deal with the injury, and play continues wherever play is on the field. And
but it's a much more stop-start game, and also it doesn't have any goalkeepers.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Very fair point. Interesting. We'd like to know more of your thoughts on this. 08085 909 693. What's the rule that you would change in football? There's two that I would change. And for me, one of them is the offside rule. I think that it's too complicated right now, and I would draw a line 20 metres away from the goal, and you can't be offside until the ball's crossed that line. So the ball has to be the first thing that goes in. I think that's the most simple thing. It's something that they've done in field hockey, and it works really, really well. And the other thing, I think, is one of the proposals recently, taking free kicks to yourself. Just take them and get on with the game. And I think that would speed up the game. And it would just allow you, if you are a bright player who can see an opportunity, you can take it straight away and just get on and go. And that would force some of the players and some of the teams to act in a slightly different way, because you've got to be right on it. I think those are two little rules that may change things. Feel free to disagree with that. 08085 909 693 or 85058 on the text. Get in touch with us. Let us know what you think about that. The offside rule, though, is always going to be the one, isn't it? Because in the end, it's become so complicated now to what phase of play we're in and which player is actually interfering with play and who's not. It's gone way beyond that. They just need to look at the rule and start again, it feels like to me.
But again, look at some of the old games. I mean, the 74 World Cup final is a case in point. Germany scored a goal there that was ruled out for offside. I think it was about 7 or 8 yards onside. It was absolutely terrible then. The standard, now you have got specialist referees, assistants who work together. The standard of that, I think, has got so much better. I actually think they do a pretty good job, because there's an aspect of that linesman and referees assistant's job, which is almost impossible, isn't it? Which is,
Tim, you're going into remix mode right now. We'll get your line back up again. That's Tim Vickery. If you've got a question for him, give us a ring right now. You're listening to the World Football Phone-In on 5 Live. We'll talk more about the potential rule changes that you want to suggest. But let's speak to Carl, who's in London this evening. Good morning, Carl.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Who do you want to speak to?
And John, if that's okay.
Yeah, John?
I'm hopefully ready and not doing any DJ mode stuff. Tim, he's such a fan of the classics, but he busts out that electronica too, man. He's a modern man. Don't let him fool you. Sorry, go ahead.
He can multitask, definitely.
He loves a remix. Off you go, Carl.
Okay, well, I'm actually heading out to the States at the end of the month, off to Seattle, and I just wondered, I'm trying to just go for a kickabout when I'm there and maybe watch the matches, but I'm assuming that in the US it's a bit harder to find a game rather than just walking through a random park like you would in London. So I wondered, do you have to join some sort of social networking site, or are there organizations that organize that kind of thing, or is it just simply going to a green space and hoping someone's got a football?
Yeah, I'd say a mix of all three. I mean, there's certainly areas of the country where there's frustration because you want to play, you got a ball, you turn up to a park, and there's no one else there. So there have been a couple companies that have started apps and various. There hasn't been one that's sort of dominated the market yet. So you kind of have to look around. I'm sure you can find them on the App Store if you search, soccer, kickabout, something like that. Okay. So some of those work and work well. But oftentimes, especially in a city like Seattle, where so many people are outdoors so frequently and so many people have fallen in love with the game, you can also probably turn up to a park depending on your neighborhood. What I'd recommend is looking up the supporters groups in Seattle. Most supporters groups of MLS clubs have some sort of, all are welcome under 99 games, some places call them, where, anyone can kind of jump in and play, kick around a little bit. And then, maybe you get to meet somebody who has a spare ticket for the game, or who will stand next to you at the game, or what have you, and sort of form a relationship. So I would look them up on Twitter, or look up their website, maybe on their bulletin board, their forum, and see if maybe they've got a weekly kickabout or something like that. I think in most cities where they have an MLS team, that's something that's going to be available to you.
Okay, that's great. Can I ask a cheeky sub-question as well, if that's okay?
Yeah, you can. Fire away.
Well, I've just seen the list that Cleo put up about the Gold Cup, and I've seen the Jamaica squad that's going to get ready. I'm wondering what you think their chances are of reaching the final again. And also, I'm dating a Midwesterner who's from Iowa. Now, I know they haven't got any pro teams out there, so I wondered which MLS team you think I should lean towards.
Yeah. Let's start there. I think that Iowa, having no pro teams in general, there's a couple minor league teams, but my understanding is that a lot of them root for Kansas City teams. Sporting Kansas City is an MLS team that is doing well right now. They've got a great fan base, a beautiful stadium, one of my favorite stadiums to visit in the U.S., so I'd say give them a look. You're not too far from Chicago either. The Fire are having a great season with Bastian Schweinsteiger, so if you want to hunt a little glory there, maybe there, but I think Sporting might be your best bet for culture. Jamaica, it's interesting because they've been so good for various stretches, and this is just not one of them. They let their coach that took them to the final last time, Winifred Schaefer, go. Theo Whitmore is back at the helm of Jamaica.
Really?
They weren't able to get to win the Caribbean Cup. They lost to Curaçao in the final. And they're in a group with Curaçao again, and Mexico, and El Salvador. I don't love their chances of getting out necessarily, because I don't think that they necessarily even have their best players. There's a lot of MLS-based guys. So Andre Blake, the goalkeeper, he's one of the best for sure. But after that, I don't know. Kamar Lawrence, great left back, but I don't think they have the depth that they could maybe when they were taking advantage of the connections that they had, that players in the championship, or even some West Oregon. Right, exactly. Giles Barnes, the same situation where their heritage.
I've seen they left Tim's favorite player, Dwayne Kerr, in the IPL. So
yeah. No, but that's not a selection decision I would question on any merit other than Tim's humor. But the other ones I do question. I wonder about. I'm not sure that when you don't bring in players like Wes Morgan, Michael Hector, some of it is just about those players wanting to get ready for the new season. And as I mentioned, a lot of coaches are taking this as an opportunity to sort of call in some young players. Maybe Jamaica's doing the same, but I'm not sure their roster's strong enough to go very deep in this tournament. I'm skeptical about the Reggae Boys.
Okay, Carl, thanks very much for your call. That's Carl, who's looking to play football when he goes out to Seattle. For me, I would suggest you just head down to the main stadium, right by the Space Needle, because on Sundays they have all kinds of games going on down there. That might be one for you. Tony's our next caller, though. Welcome to the World Football Phone-In. Good morning, Tony.
Thank you very much. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, good. Who's your question for?
It's kind of to the two guys, to be honest. I have a quick question in regards to player evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And we always hear about European clubs bidding for South American teenagers, and I always wonder how they come up with the price value on these kids, essentially. And moving on from that, I want to know whether Lukaku for 75 million is a bargain, or is it a bit of a
bit of a rip-off.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Tim, do you want to take this one?
Well, the whole transfer market is insane, and the price valuation, it seems to have very little connection to anything apart from how much money can you get to pay for him. What will the market bear? Now, clearly, for a kind of South American, anyone coming straight out of South America, the price is less. Risk is higher. Is a proven performer in the Premier League, and therefore the risk is much, much less than someone that you're bringing in from an entirely different culture. And that you can look at all the statistics of that player from the league in which he's been playing, but how relevant are they to the league in which he's going? And that factor makes it difficult to find a price, and clearly means that players coming in from South America are usually cheaper, unless you're Real Madrid, and you've got lots and lots of money, and you're angry about missing out on Neymar and Gabriel Jesus, because they've spent an absolute fortune on a 16-year-old Brazilian called Vinicius Jr., an absolute fortune. And he looks like, I mean, there is some special talent there, but at the age of 16, you really don't know how good he's going to turn out to be. There's so many things that can happen in that age group, 16, 17, 18, 19 age group. There's so many things that can happen. So in that sense, Real Madrid have spent the money because they can, and because well, if it doesn't work out later on, they can sell him off and get some of it back, and hopefully they can make it with the back with shirt sales. But mainly, more than anything else, it's just a message to the rest of the football world, a proclamation. We are Real Madrid. We are very, very powerful. Don't mess with us. The idea that there is some kind of logical basis, some kind of precise logical basis by which transfer fees are agreed, I think is false. It's almost like numbers plucked out of the air. And if someone got that number for an equivalent player, well, why don't we try that number and add on 20%?
I think you're probably about right with that. Tony, thanks very much for your call. We'll come back to some of the other points that you raised a little bit later on. You're listening to the World Football Phone-In on 5 Live. Lots of you getting in on the text as well. We've been talking a bit about rule changes. Mike from Clevedon says, scrap the offside rule altogether. Then no more arguments as to whether a goal should or shouldn't have been allowed. John Arnold, scrap the offside rule altogether. You for that?
No, I don't think so. And also, I appreciate the idea, but I just think on one level, and this goes beyond just the text, I think when we talk about VAR, people are expecting that this video review system will get all the calls right. That's never going to happen. And we're never going to come to an agreement on everything. We're never going to say, when your team loses, you're upset. You want to be upset at something. And sometimes you're upset at the injustice of it all. And there will be bad calls no matter what. And I just don't think we're ever going to reach some sort of equilibrium where, we got all the calls right. Or, everyone's happy. It's not going to happen. And that's fine. And that's good. And we should embrace that.
So they shouldn't be called referees, just blame hounds.
Well, there's certainly worse things I've heard referees called.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Tim, would you be an advocate of scrapping offside and getting rid of the pepper pots and the rest of it?
I wouldn't. I think having offside improves the flow of the game, the passing of the ball through the middle of the field. And I'm with John 100% on this. There's a kind of nerdish tendency to think that we can achieve a kind of utopia where there'll be no controversy about any refereeing decisions. There always will be. So many of them are issues of interpretation and not of fact. And even offside, anyone who works in TV will tell you that those images that, in inverted commas, prove definitively it was offside or it wasn't, they are dependent on the exact moment at which the tape operator freezes the frame. That might, because that's a process of the ball being kicked. That takes, a few nanoseconds, and for some of those nanoseconds, the fella might have been onside, and for some of them, he might have been offside. They are marginal, borderline decisions, and there will always be controversy about them. And I agree with John 100%, and you, and that's a great expression. I think, blame hounds, and so many people, and you see this with coaches all the time. They hide behind the referee. They do this all the time, and they're allowed to get away with it, which I think is wrong. Because on the basic post-match question, I think, was, what was your team trying to do? To what extent did you manage to do it? And why didn't you manage to do it better? Those, I think, are just the basic questions. And so often the coach is able to get away from these questions, to get away from talking about what he's actually been doing during the week, just by pinning the blame on a referee. And I don't think the game benefits in any way from that at all.
You know what that brings me to? Great footballing excuses. Because it is an excuse, isn't it? So often when the referee, their performance is brought out front of stage, and there are few better. There's few better than Jose Mourinho at doing this. He's absolutely skilled in how he can, at times, deflect the attention away from his players' performance. But one of my particular favourites is manager takes over job, and within the first 10 days, the players just aren't fit enough. I don't know what they've been doing here, but they're just not fit enough. And then that buys them at least 5 or 6 weeks while they get these players mid-season fit. which to me is absolutely balmy. But that's one of the ones that go. If you want to get in on that, please feel free.
It's a lonely job, isn't it, being a coach? I know they got a backup team there, but come match day, the coach is there, standing on the touchlines with this is more true in South America than it is in Europe, I think, with the fans calling him an idiot. It's a lonely, lonely job. They get well paid for it in most cases, but you can understand that there is a natural tendency not to want to take responsibility for anything, because everything is being shoveled at your door. You become responsible for everything. So who can I unload this to? But coaches do this all the time. They try and wriggle off the hook and not take responsibility for the work that they've been doing during the week, or should have been doing during the week.
A couple more.
Another phenomenon that I think is really interesting, Seth, and Mourinho is good at this as well, and Tuca Ferretti, who coaches Tigres, one of the best coaches in my region, Brazilian but naturalized Mexican, has been here for decades. He will heap the blame on himself, where perhaps a player is at fault for a bad miss or a missed defensive assignment over and over again, losing track of their man, what have you. After the game, he'll say, I failed. And he'll go off on a little rant. And he knows the headline tomorrow will not be center back blows assignment. It'll be Tuca goes on rant. And so I think it is about balancing. And sometimes, the coaches with a little bit of leash, the ones whose job isn't necessarily in question this week, next week, knows sometimes you have to deflect the attention to yourself instead of away from it. So it's definitely interesting to watch the games that managers play and how well they play them after the one they've diagrammed, the one in the press.
Elsewhere on the text, 85058. Penalty deciders for every single game. That's one suggestion.
I like draw. That's come from the United States, isn't it? That's come from John Arnold territory, surely, that one. What's the matter with a draw? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a draw. What's the matter with that?
Sometimes it's the right result, but I have American sports fanatic friends who still say, I can't get over the fact that you can get a draw. I did like the old MLS shootout model where they started from around midfield and had to dribble up and beat the goalkeeper. That was fun, but I'm cool with the draws. I'm glad we have them in MLS now.
Get rid of extra time or Fergie time. Just stop the clock like they do in rugby. Then there are no more arguments. Would you be in favour of that?
Absolutely against, because what that actually does is it legitimizes time wasting. It makes time wasting all right, because if you can just add that time on the end, okay, waste as much time as you want to do, and what that happens there is you disrupt the flow of the game. And that is the crucial point. It's also, I think, a no-go, really, I think, from the point of TV. And I remember watching a basketball game during the Olympics. It was absolute torture. There was 2 minutes left. I was waiting for it to end so something decent could come on. And there was 2 minutes left. And those 2 minutes on the clock, they took half an hour, for crying out loud.
Best 2 minutes in the game, though. Value for money.
Yeah, absolute rubbish. It was just torture. Please, we have a timeout here and a timeout there. I'm just yelling, just please end. And one of the things that makes TV makes football very attractive to TV, and it's TV that banks the whole spectacle, isn't it? Is more or less when the game's going to finish, with the exception of those knockout games that go into extra time. But you can fit the game into those 2 hour slots. It's a big problem that tennis has in some kind of growing markets, in some markets that aren't used to tennis. You don't know exactly when the game's going to finish. You know when it's going to start, but you don't know when it's going to finish. And if you have this thing with football, then Parkinson's law will come in, and halves of football that should take 45 minutes will end up taking an hour and a half.
One more before we get to Stuart, who's on the line. 08085 909 693 is the number for you to get involved in the conversation here on the World Football Phone-In. This is one that I want you to answer, John. It's on rules as well. A key rule change to maintain the rhythm of soccer. Change the rule around the goalkeeper. He or she is only allowed to parry, not catch the ball. Therefore, the game is more continuous and there should be better entertainment.
That's actually a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, it's one I've not heard before.
No, that's really fascinating. Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I don't hate it. It definitely would give us some more flow, which is good, as Tim has mentioned. I think we want the rhythm to happen, the flow happen. But, there's something to be said for a goalkeeper coming out strong, catching off his line. And sometimes, if the team is playing a certain way, that flow is not interrupted at all. He immediately rolls the ball out to a player who's trying to break for a counterattack. But, maybe, again, I think some of this comes down to better understanding or enforcement of the laws. I'm not convinced that it's catching that's the problem. I think it's maybe the 6 seconds rule just being ignored. It's goalkeepers are allowed to take ages right now. And there's a law on the books against that is rarely enforced. Sometimes you see a late yellow card for a goalkeeper who's just taking all day. But I think if we actually looked at what the rules said and tried to apply that, then maybe we would have, a bit more flow and a more enjoyable product. But I like the idea. That's a good idea. I'm still in a laissez-faire way. Let's leave our hands off. But
Okay. Thank you for the moment. Let's speak to Stuart, who's in Nova Scotia. Good morning, Stuart.
All right, Seth, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you very much. Who's your question for?
My question's for John.
Fire away.
I'm hoping sometime in the future I can think of a question to ask Tim, but right now I don't have it.
That's okay. You can keep working on it. It's no problem.
John. I hope you were watching too, but I just finished watching Canada against Guyana there in Gold Cup CONCACAF action, and it was a really good game. Of course, finished 4-2 to Canada. We looked a little bit risky there in the middle. We're 3-0 up. They got back to 3-2. But the game was sealed by a 16-year-old, Alphonso Davies from Vancouver Whitecaps. He scored twice. 2 lovely finishes, both of them through the keeper's legs. The first one, especially for 3-0, was delightful finish. Just wondering about your take on him, John. You know much about him, or what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I know quite a bit about him. I watched him with the Vancouver Whitecaps. One thing I've been impressed by is a lot of times you have these young phenoms, and sure they look good, in one game here, one game there. But to me, he's shown remarkable consistency. He's been solid when he played in the CONCACAF Champions League against top opponents in the region. He was able to hold his own, and now with 2 goals against French Guiana, not the best team in CONCACAF, but it's the right start. I spoke with Octavio Zambrano, the Canada manager, before the tournament, and he said this is a team that's looking for the future with the academies that they're developing in Canada, and with some of the young players who are children of immigrants and have kind of gone back to the country, of their parents' birth. Like a Lucas Carolini, who's playing in Uruguay right now, a couple players that are also throughout Central and South America. He's casting a wider net. Zambrano is, he's Ecuadorian coach. I think the fact that he's bilingual can kind of help with that. And so it's interesting. This is one for the future for Canada is what I'm getting at. And Davies, at 16 years old, I believe Mr. Chip, the Spanish statistician, tweeted that he was the first player born after 2000 to score in a top-level FIFA tournament. So first of all, we're all very old. And second, it's impressive what he's been able to do. He's very fast. He's good with the ball at his feet. And as you probably know, Stuart, similar to a lot of kids in Canada, was born elsewhere. Was a Liberian citizen, I believe. Got his citizenship this year to Canada. I think
he's actually Ghanaian, I think. But as far as I know, he only became Canadian, I think, 1 month ago.
Yeah, he's just now
very recent Canadian citizenship.
Yeah. His parents were Liberian, but he was living in Ghana. You're right. But just this year, and I think the more open Zambrano is to that, the better, because Canada's a country that's welcoming to people from all over the world right now, and that's not the reason to be open to people, is that your football team will get better, but I think it helps. So it's quite the story, and I'm fascinated to see how he does against some of the other competition in the group. Honduras and Costa Rica both have more experience in defense. They both have big bruisers there who will definitely put a body into him. And we'll have to see how he goes. But so far, the early returns, you have to be thrilled if you're a Canadian fan that he's representing your country and doing it so well at such a young age.
Yeah, everybody's thrilled, but like you say, John, the Costa Rica Honduras games are going to be a different feeling, because they're 2 very good teams that have a consistent record of doing Canada over, so.
Yeah, for sure. I know Honduras it flashes the panic signs because of those qualification games that they've gotten the better of Canada in. But listen, I think Zambrano, one of the things he stressed to me was slow and steady, that the progress isn't going to come overnight, that, Canada's not going to win the Gold Cup again, it's for the first time since 2000 this time around. But if they start building now with a solid base, by the time you're looking at the Qatar World Cup and then the one that they're probably going to end up being a part host of in 2030, you could have a team that's not only able to compete at that level, but maybe formidable. And his aim is to make them one of the giants in CONCACAF. A long way to go until that happens. But with these teenagers and young 20-year-old players who are getting this experience this year, maybe this is a start. I don't know. It's a sleeping giant to me, Canada, because there's so much talent there that hasn't really emerged, that hasn't blossomed. I think we might be starting to see the first sort of bloom as the shoots come up. Maybe we'll see a flower in 5 years.
Stuart, thank you very much for your call. It's the World Football phone-in on 5 Live. 08085 909 693 is your route through to John Arnold, who you just heard from, the Legendino. Tim Vickery here as well, taking your questions about North and South America. You're looking forward to that nice reunion, the 2030 World Cup, Tim?
I am, yeah. I mean, we don't know where it's going to be yet. But it's the centenary of the World Cup, which started in Uruguay in 1930. Now, there's no way that Uruguay can hold a competition these days on their own. They've only really got one city. So there is talk of a Argentina-Uruguay joint bid. There could be problems there. There could be problems with John Arnold's lot, because the United States want 2026. So you're going to have two consecutive World Cups in the Americas. So that there's and some other continents. That would mean a lot of World Cups outside Europe in a row. So there could well be some controversy and some backstage politicking until South America runs. You think so? But I mean, the downside of holding it in Argentina and Uruguay in 2030 would be in June. Oh, it's bitter. It's so cold, really cold. And that the wind off the River Plate in Montevideo, it just cuts you, really cuts you. So if it is going to be the World Cup there, wrap up warm.
Is it a bit like Carlisle?
I've never been. I did go to Newcastle once in December, and it was so cold I cried. So it's probably a little bit like that.
Akshay has been on, and he says, please could you ask the panellists to tell us more about the future stars in the teams from their regions for the Under-17 World Cup. Chile and Brazil will play in that Under-17 World Cup in India. It's a massive event for India, and Akshay would like you to give a few names for him to look out for.
And Paraguay as well, representing South America. Well, and the class acts in qualification were Brazil, and really were on head and shoulders above everyone else. And they looked very, very exciting indeed. With the jewel in the crown was this fella that we've already mentioned on the show, Vinicius Junior of Flamengo, who's already been signed for by Real Madrid. They can't get him for another couple of years until he's old enough to cross the Atlantic. But there are a few in that side, on Paulinho, the midfielder, who looked very, very, really, really exciting. What I will say is that from past experience, under 17 level, it comes so early in the careers that it's an unreliable guide. I mean, the least successful Brazil under-17 side of recent years was in 2009. Now, this is a side that were eliminated in the group stage. It's hard to be eliminated in the group stage of the under-17 World Cup. I think there's 24 teams and 16 go through. So you've got to try quite hard to be eliminated. And Brazil were eliminated because they couldn't buy a goal. Do you know who the front pair were?
Go on.
Neymar and Felipe Coutinho. They couldn't buy a goal. They lost a couple of games 1-0. They won the first one against Japan. I think it was 3-2, but only because the Japanese goalkeeper just bizarrely threw the ball into his own net in the last the last action of the game. So that side was just a total failure. And look what they've gone on to. The one that I attended, that I was at covering, was in Peru in 2005, and that was won by Mexico with. The best player there was Giovanni Dos Santos, Carlos Vela, who then went on to Arsenal. I always had the feeling that winning that World Cup didn't do that particular generation any favours at all.
No.
I think it would have been better for the development of a number of careers there, perhaps everyone with the exception of Hector Moreno. Would have been better for all of them not to have won that competition, because they became proclaimed as geniuses, and that they were told that they'd really achieved something when they hadn't. You know, it's under 17 level. Results should never be the most important thing at that level of the game, and I think it created too much hype around them. I think they believed their own hype, and very few of that side have gone on to fulfil their potential. So I'd love John's thoughts about this in a minute. So in general, I think the World Under-17 Cup is something to be really, really enjoyed, but don't take it too seriously in terms of performances in 3 or 4 years' time.
I completely take what you're saying there, Tim, but I go and watch Saturday morning under-8s football in Bolton.
Yeah, but you've got to declare an interest. You got your offspring out there, haven't you?
I do, but the first of all, the number of scouts that are there from Premier League clubs is ridiculous, which it just makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable. But secondly, is the fact that coaches and managers at that level will do whatever to win, and
which is wrong. It's wrong. Isn't
absolutely. I was officiating in one game, and in the end had to blow the whistle and tell the two managers on opposite sides of the pitch, unless they stopped bickering with each other about whether or not the ball went out for a throw-in, I was going to stop the game.
Pathetic.
Under-8s football.
That's really, really depressing.
Oh, at times it is really, really depressing. But it is interesting, isn't it, when you do look at the under-17s level and the under-20s level from an English perspective, what you actually can extrapolate from that to good professional careers. Because when you look at Manchester United and you see that wonderful class of players that moved through and were a part of that United team that went on to do so well, you could take a little bit of that and you could take something from that and see where they went to in the future. Yeah, no, it happens. But if you think of all the changes that someone is going through at that stage in their life, physically, mentally, defining themselves, changing from man to boy, there are so many pitfalls, and some who shine at that age, it's a case of precocious physical developments, and they're quickly caught up. Under 20 level for me is a pretty good guide. When in South America, under 20 level is really, really important, and those who shine at under 20 level are usually fast tracked into the senior national squad. You saw that with Venezuela, who lost the final against England. Now Venezuela had their senior coach in charge of that team, and a number of those players have already played for Venezuela at senior level in World Cup qualification, and they will form the heart of the side that tries to qualify for the World Cup in 2022. But under 17, it's so far away from what they're going to be like when they mature that it's not a level that you can make definitive conclusions about, although it's a tournament that really is to be enjoyed. I'm envious of our friends there in India who get a chance to be part of this thing, because it's a really, really enjoyable tournament. And hopefully, when that tournament kicks off, I think it's October in India, isn't it? Hopefully, we'll get people there from India phoning in and telling us about it. John, in 40 seconds, will it be a tournament that captures the imagination of the football fans in North America?
No. But there is a decent U.S. team. I don't know if these guys will go because of the club commitments and stuff, but Andrew Carlton and Josh Sargent. Carlton plays in the Atlanta United system. Josh Sargent is from Missouri, set to join a Bundesliga team once he hits 18, I think. For Mexico, I doubt he'll play very much, but Diego Lainez, who's already starting for America, one of the big clubs here, is age eligible. So, there could be some guys to come out of it, but as Tim says, I think a lot of it is the development. A lot of times here is happening at the club level at that stage.
Very good morning to you. This is 5 Live. This is the World Football Phone-In Up All Night. Seth Bennett with you through until 5 o'clock. No Dotton tonight. He's having a little bit of a rest. South America, North America and Central America are the regions for this week's World Football Phone-In. Tim Vickery and John Arnold are the experts. The number that you need, 08085 909 693. Calls are free from mobiles and landlines. You can text us 85058. Texts are charged at your standard message rate, and we're also on social media at 5 Live. So you can find us in all of these various different places. We've been talking rule changes, and Gents, I set you a little question right at the very start of this part of the programme where we talked about having to buy things back that you really wish you hadn't let go. And this might be footballers for your various teams or your clubs, but it might be something else from the rest of your life. Starting with you, Tim, what would you want to have back?
Could I have a time before there were grey hair? Could I have them back?
I thought that was all part of the look.
Well, yeah, but I did quite like them when it was before they were. I know it adds a certain air of being distinguished, but I'd quite like to have them back, really.
If you button your shirt all the way to the top, we won't see quite as many.
Well, that's a low blow. That's a low. Next time I pass cross, you'll be reminded of that.
As you pop 2 more buttons, John, what about you?
Well, I want to take it in a different way. I think that oftentimes football clubs don't realize that they need to buy something. They don't realize that they need to replace someone, especially in the CONCACAF region. This year with Pumas, a proud Mexico City team, they had a center back, Dario Veron, an absolute club legend, phenomenal player, just beyond the level at Liga MX now, not fast enough to deal with it. And they just kept playing him because what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to bench a legend? There are times, I think, that happens in life. And for me, it was never brought into clarity more than today when I was driving on one of Dallas's fine toll roads and heard a noise and realized, that tire that I had really needed to replace probably 2-3 months ago is no longer with us and is kind of strewn about the highway. So shout out to the roadside assistance man who came to help me with a better jack than the one I had in my car. I'm here safe and sound, but I was worried for a minute I was going to miss the phone in. So that tire, that's what I really needed in my life. Is a few months to do a replacement.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
You become tired of Dario Veron. That was the problem.
I had indeed.
It is the World Football Phone-In on 5 Live, 85058. Which player would you like to see back with your team? Who should you never have let go? And there's a question, I guess, down a similar line from Jesse, who joins us from Houston. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Seth. What's going on? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Who's your question for and what is it?
Well, it was directed towards both guys on there, Legendino and John Arnold. Pretty much the question is, since we're on that subject of what we could wish we'd have back, if South America could have 3 players back that they recently transferred out toward Europe in the last 10 years, what 3 players would Legendino like to see back, and in what country to compete for the Copa Libertadores and also at the FIFA World Cup? Same question for John Arnold from CONCACAF. Central America, North America, who we really like to see back that left 10 years ago. Why? And see if we could compete for the FIFA World Cup, Club World Cup, that is.
Jesse, thanks for your question. Your phone line's not great, so we'll take that in order. John, you can kick us off on this one.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think a lot of the guys who leave CONCACAF for Europe are in greener pastures. They're making more money. They're playing more prestigious games. They're getting better competition. So I don't know that we necessarily want to rip them back. But if you say, forget about all that, it's all about making the Club World Cup, I would say I would keep Raul Jimenez, the Mexico forward at Club America. He moved to Atletico Madrid in sort of a panic buy, I think, from the Spanish club. He's certainly good enough to play in Spain, but at the time had just happened to be coming off a red-hot season with Mexico. America struggled a couple years, this past year and the year before that in the Club World Cup. I think he might have been able to make the difference next to Uribe Peralta, or maybe they wouldn't even have bought Peralta at all if Jimenez was there. Keylor Navas, a guy who left Saprissa, a phenomenal club. They had a good goalkeeper replace him as well, Danny Carvajal, who now also is heading to Spain. I believe he's going over to the 2nd division. But it would have been fun to see him still. And maybe in some of those CONCACAF Champions League games where Saprissa's defense was a bit overmatched, having a guy like him behind would have made the difference as well. And maybe this doesn't count. And again, I'm not saying this would be good for his development, but Christian Pulisic, the U.S. phenomenal player who didn't play for an MLS team, straight to Borussia Dortmund. It would have been fun to see him play in MLS for a few years before going. It's better for his development that he's there. But again, in this sort of fantasy world that we're having, maybe he plays for a team like the New York Red Bulls or New York City FC, not too far from his native Pennsylvania, and can take them to glory before heading off to Europe, to the greener pastures. So it wouldn't be better for his development, but maybe would have been fun to see one of those teams kind of make a charge at continental glory. So those would be my 3.
Tim?
Yeah, I'm going to take it, I think, in a little bit of a different way, because I agree 100% with the point that John made. I think it applies even more to here. You kind of have to say goodbye to them. And it's sad that there's more than I would care to list that I would love to come back. And I've had the privilege of watching their first few steps. And all right, it would be great to watch them on a weekly basis, Neymar and co. But you kind of know that they got to go. And it's not just about money. It's about developing as a professional. It's about playing in a higher standard football. And you can't begrudge people that opportunity. But what I think is the most interesting part of Jesse's question is about the Club World Cup and making it competitive, and it has a real problem, which is the total imbalance between the level of club football in Europe and the level of club football in the rest of the world. There are some hopeful signs. I mean, the amount of money going into China, for example, is a hopeful sign, because what we want as fans is a spectacle. And, you would love to have a final where the non-European side can play the European side on equal terms. At the moment, the non-European side can win, but only from defending inside a trench and winning 1-0. Hanging on for grim death and breaking out once and winning 1-0. That's been the only way that the South American sides have been able to beat the European sides. And it's not a thing which is particularly interesting for the neutral. So where I want to go with John on this is I'm becoming increasingly of the opinion that a kind of Champions League for the Americas is necessary. And I know that the logistical problems are absolutely huge, and we are dealing with your space and my space. The distances are just enormous. We're dealing with different hemispheres. Just the journey from Buenos Aires in Argentina to Mexico City is further than the distance between London and several cities in India. And you think about going above that all the way to, I don't know, Vancouver or Toronto, and the distances are absolutely vast. But the synergies are there. On the one hand, you've got Major League Soccer growing well, attracting players, but lacking credibility. On the other, you've got South American football is dripping in credibility, but not going anywhere. I mean, the level of club football here is going down and down and down. In the middle, you've got Mexico, who are a huge potential market and a very, very interesting league. Now, you put the three of those together in some format, and you might get something competitive out of it with a potentially massive TV audience as well. And then maybe you're talking about the kind of financial thing where you can hold on to more players and come up with a top-level club football that is able to challenge Europe, thus making the Club World Cup a much more interesting prospect. So what do you think, John, about the idea of some kind of Champions League for the Americas?
I think the way we have to do it, Tim, and clearly you and I will be the main benefactors financially from this venture. I think the way we have to do it is... I was trying
not to declare too much of an interest in that. And I was trying to make it look from a totally neutral perspective.
No. We wouldn't make a dime. I think it would be interesting, but, as we talk about on the show a lot, the fixture congestion is bad already, and I think it could get worse. But I think the way to avoid that is make this a real spectacle. Put it in one country in a brief period of time. Now, it would be difficult, but I think that could also be part of the competition. If you're going to be one of the best teams in the Americas, you need to have some sort of depth. A lot of teams have very strong first 11 and no depth. Fine, we'll do a tournament. We'll get however many teams. We're going to put it all in this country, in these closely compact cities, not much travel required, and we're going to rotate the site because I'm tired of having so many things in the United States, even though it makes a ton of money. It can be here now and then, but let's put it all over the course of 2 weeks. Then there's no extra fixture congestion, no issues, and let's do it. I think it could work, and if we put some buzz around it, there would be excitement in North America and South America, a trade off the sites, and maybe it could be something that could work.
There we go. We've got the ball rolling here. Now we just need the authorities to take it on. It all starts at the World Football Forum.
There are people working on this. There is a proposal for this, and the proposal, I think, would prefer a league basis rather than the tournament basis, which both myself and John see as entirely rational. But I mean, looking at the future of South American club football, without something like this, I'm worried. because the level of the game here is going down, and it is increasingly becoming an export industry, and I'm concerned for its future.
Keep your calls coming. 08085 909 693 is the number to get through to the World Football Phone in. Tim Vickery and John Arnold taking your calls. We've been talking all about rule changes. And what about this for a suggestion on the text? 85058 is the text number. How about we enforce the goalkeepers to release the ball after 6 seconds? That rule needs to be enforced better.
John said that. I think that's spot on.
He did, but this...
I have to agree.
But this texter goes on. A new 6-second ball release rule for throw-ins. Enforce a 20-second corner and free kick release rule. If that's not done, then you reverse the decision and the other team gets the ball. All ball boys to have a ball to replace the ball which goes out of play or into the crowd. And if they have a goal line assistant, referees must get their help to get players off the field immediately. Lastly, Tim, get a decent broadband connection. It's not as easy as that. It really isn't.
The only concern I have, well, I have a lot of concerns about Tim's connection, but the concern I have about the rule changes is what happens if you don't do it. So if the goalkeeper doesn't release the ball in 6 seconds, what happens? And especially with a ball boy, I mean, it's pretty harsh to penalize a 13-year-old kid for losing track of a ball, I think. So I like the spirit, and baseball even which is by nature a slow game, has also done the same thing where there's now a count for pitchers to start throwing to the mound. And if they don't do it, I'm not sure what the penalty is there either, but I think it is motivation when you see a big countdown clock. Hey, this is how much time you have. I'm not sure that's a bridge we want to cross with the actual clock, but I agree that that's a good idea to start to tighten up the game, and maybe some sort of more defined regulations on things like throw-ins would be good.
Well, you could imagine a whole stadium chanting a countdown, couldn't you? Every time the ball goes out of play, all of a sudden they're counting to 6 as fast as they can, trying to force the referee to give the ball back the other way. It's an interesting point. Pete in Guildford says, Dear 5 Live and the World Football Phone in, rule change. This is my suggestion. Substitutions, double the add-on time for the time taken to get off the pitch to remove the time-wasting tactic. This is like some kind of A-level maths question. Double the add-on time for the time taken to get off the pitch, and this will remove the time-wasting tactic. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, all of these things, we are making the referee a kind of a time lord, aren't we? I mean, to bring in these things, I think you need a specialist timekeeper to take that responsibility away from the referee. I am obviously totally in favour of the flow of the game, but there's one thing that I don't think should be forgotten, which is that the intensity of the game these days is much greater than it used to be. And there's a stat that I love, which I got from the fellow who used to be Brazil's physical preparation specialist, which was that in the mid-70s, players would run an average 5,000 metres per game. By the mid-90s, that had doubled. And now you get people running 13,000 per game. So we are asking the players to do a lot. Now, we are putting a lot, and I think at the moment the players are already playing too much football. I would like to see the industry as a whole perhaps pay less to play less. Because the spectacle, I think, is harmed. It's harmed by too many games and not enough training time. And so all of these things to make them run just as much as possible. I wonder if we're putting too many physical demands on today's players.
I think it's a good point, that. It's an interesting point as well, isn't it? But the flip side of that is, aren't you just asking them to play for 90 minutes? And just because you run 12 kilometres, it doesn't mean you're running 12 smart kilometres. And that's the other bit.
But that's, sure. But that can be harder. My big example, you're a little bit too young to remember him, but an English distance runner called David Bedford, who was an absolute metronome. And he would just run exactly the same pace. I think he was a world record holder, maybe 10,000 metres or something like that. And it was all just the same pace. When he got to the Olympic finals, there'd be 3 Kenyans chopping and changing the rhythm. He couldn't cope with it, just couldn't do it. Made that discipline totally different for him. And that's what football is all about. It's all about the constant changes of pace, the constant twists and turns, the constant change of direction. And they in themselves are tiring, and they in themselves take a toll, especially on the knee.
Yeah, exactly. Both knees, hips, according to a lot of the old footballers that I know, particularly those that played in the 70s and 80s. Matthews in Birmingham, he says, as a Coventry City fan, for me, it's both Robbie Keane and Kevin Gallagher, two players that they wish they hadn't have sold, and they would love to get them back at whatever the cost. We're talking about that because of Romelu Lukaku potentially returning to Chelsea for £75 million. Manchester United have got the money on the table as well. If you want to get in touch, you can. You've got, 39 minutes to get yourself on the show. 08085 909 693 is the number for you to get through to the World Football phone-in. John Arnold is here fielding calls about North America and the CONCACAF region. Tim Vickery is here speaking about South American football. What's been the big story in South American football this week, Tim?
Copa Libertadores, I think. We've just had the first games in the knockout round, so we're down to 16. We will obviously have 8 quarter-finalists. It's a new calendar this year. It's a brand new calendar. We used to have the Libertadores crammed into like half of the year. So straight after the group phase, you'd go straight into the knockout games, and you'd really cram it in. This year, we're going from the end of January all the way through to the end of November. So it's a different calendar. The group phase finished at the end of May. So we had a pause of more than a month for the first legs of the knockout phase. We've got another pause now of 5 weeks until the second leg. So it is now really spaced out. Now, this is controversial in itself because there's no doubt about it. This benefits the Brazilians who play a yearly calendar, and the Brazilian season starts, it follows the year calendar. Argentina, for example, they're on holiday now. So between now and when the return games happen, which is second week in August, there's no competitive games for Argentinian sides. The Argentinian clubs would far prefer to have a Libertadores. If it's going to go the whole year, they would far prefer it to start in August and go through to May, following the European season. So this is one for the future, and it's still being worked out very much on the fly. But anyway, on the field, after the 8 first leg ties, which were very, very good for the visiting teams, there is a real danger that the last 8 in the Libertadores will be exclusively teams from Brazil and Argentina, which I don't think is healthy for the competition at all. There's been more space for Brazilians and Argentines in the tournament this year. They've got more slots, and just the way that those first legs have lined up, you can't see a lot of hope for too many of the non-Brazilians or non-Argentine sides. And perhaps Barcelona of Ecuador, who beat Palmeiras of Brazil, the Brazilian champions, 1-0, and Barcelona are very good on the counter-attack, so they will go with high hopes. This year's surprise side, with the name of a famous flyer from the past, Jorge Wilstermann of Bolivia, they beat Atlético Mineiro of Brazil with Frege and Robinho and so on. They beat them 1-0, but I think that they'll have a hard task holding on to that in the second leg. So there is a real prospect of 8 teams coming entirely from Brazil and Argentina. But whatever happens, I think there's going to be conflict between Brazil and Argentina behind the scenes, because the Argentines would love an August to May calendar for the Libertadores, and Brazilians, I think, are quite happy with this new calendar they did this year, going January to November.
You're listening to 5 Live from the BBC. We'll get an update on the news and sport in 5 minutes' time. 08085 909 693 is the number you need to get through to the World Football phone-in. John Arnold, question for you about a year out from the World Cup. Which CONCACAF team has you the most excited? Which one has you the most worried? That's on the way right after this call from John in Stockport. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Good morning. Basically, my question is, and I've been thinking about this since I talked about this new rule that's coming in regarding simulation of diving, basically. And whether I've misread it, what they're saying basically is over the weekend games, if a player takes a dive in the game and it's missed by a referee, a panel will sit down and look at it on a Monday. And if that panel decides the player has taken a dive, that player is then given an automatic 2-match ban. Yeah. What happens to the player that actually gets booked in a game for doing the same offence and gets a yellow card for it? Will that player, in retrospect, go on and get a 2-game ban for doing the same thing that has been spotted by the referee? If you understand the point I'm trying to make. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the other thing as well is there's a panel sitting on a Monday for the games that are played from Friday night to Sunday evening. Yeah. What happens to a player that that it happens takes a dive on a Monday night in a Monday night game or midweek game, say on Wednesday? If the panel's only sitting on a Monday, that the player concerned has got the chance to play the following weekend. You know, it seems a really crazy situation that they're talking about. I don't understand it.
I don't know the answer either. I'm not sure whether they'll have 2 sittings. It's quite a job, that was. Work Mondays and Fridays and that's it. Available if anybody's interested in needing somebody to look through some of these videos. I could do a bit of editing as well. Might be good for you. I think it's a really interesting question, that, actually, isn't it?
Because they've only actually said it, but when they talked about the rule being brought in this coming season, it clearly stated that the panel will sit on a Monday, whether it's Monday morning, Monday afternoon, you know. And I'm like I've already said, repeating myself. Obviously, games are played, as you know, guys. Tuesday night, Wednesday night, you know, right through the week. Friday night. Obviously, Monday will take care of anything from Friday night to Sunday evening, you know. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the leagues, you know, obviously during the midweek session, you know. And like I said again, if a player gets booked in a game for diving and gets a yellow card for it, is he then going to get a 2-match ban on top of it?
Well, it's a good question. I'm assuming that neither of you two have got the hard and fast answer when it comes to this.
No, although I think the general principle here is if the referee has seen it and dealt with it, then his decision is final. I understand the reservations that are being made here, but I think in general terms, the most important thing is that an effort is being made to crack down on it, which I think will have beneficial effects, even if there is the odd injustice here and there and so on. I think in general terms, this can be beneficial. There's not. We mentioned earlier on the fact that different cultures see this in a different way, and there's no doubt that the English sporting culture, British sporting culture, doesn't like it. It puts people off the game. So having this kind of retrospective thing to try and crack down on something which is cheating, I see that as beneficial. Now, obviously, there are lines here, and it's not always a kind of black and white thing. Sometimes a player is going to ground in order to avoid contact, which could hurt him. It's not always necessarily just to cheat the referee. Sometimes there is an aspect of self-preservation here, which is why I think it's absolutely vital that there are ex-players on that panel who understand what has actually gone on in that situation. But as a general principle, the idea of doing something to crack down on it, because there's no doubt these days players are much more protected than they used to be from tough tackling. So giving them the advantage of they can get away with diving as well, I think is tipping the balance too far. So for whatever little injustices might be committed, I can't see too much to complain about.
John?
Yeah, I'm not sure the regulation that the Premier League are going to do. MLS does this pretty regularly now, and of course when it was first announced similarly, people were concerned, what if we do this retroactively, what have you. But I think the disciplinary committee, they don't necessarily just meet one time a week. They can sort of make rulings whenever the games are. In MLS, there's a lot of fluidity in the calendar as well. It's generally been, I think, a big success. The players who are simulating, and also players who are participating in violent conduct that maybe the referee misses, they get punished. And I think it's been almost universally positive. As Tim mentioned, there's the odd thing that gets away. But for the most part, I think this sort of retroactive justice has indeed been justice. And that's kind of all we can ask for, I think.
Okay, thank you for the moment. It's 3:30. You're listening to 5 Live from the BBC. Jim in Ballymena says this is a rule change. The referee should control the rules of the game and an official timekeeper to be responsible for the time played. And Rob in Liverpool would like to see this rule change. Yellow card for all people who run onto the pitch without the referee's permission. That would stop all the pitch invasions by the bench when a goal is scored and presumably would speed up the game as well. This is the World Football Phone-In on 5 Live. Well, but we're talking football for the next 20 minutes or so, and there is still time for you to get your call in on 085 909 693. Tim, you're in trouble.
Go on, what have I done? Who have I offended now?
You have missed the point, no less. It happens from time to time. This is on the text. A team wanting to waste time and, more importantly, upset the rhythm takes a full 30 seconds currently. This is to do with substitutions. With the rule change, and this was like the mathematical equation rule, there would be 1 minute added, not 30 seconds, incentivizing the substituted player to get off quicker. Substitutions are so slow. Make it more like other sports, like ice hockey. That was the suggestion, not from me, but from our correspondent.
I have an issue with that as well. Because if you were, say that you're trailing by 2 goals, then can you delay your substitution as long as you like, take 2 minutes, and then get an extra 4 at the end?
That's a good question.
I think we need work on that one. I think we need work.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll send it away. Let's get to the phone lines then. Darren is in London. Good morning.
Hello.
Who's your question for?
Yeah, my question is for John.
Yep.
I'm a big Arsenal fan, and I'd just like to find out how is Patrick Vieira doing managing in the States, and how's he getting on with the players, and has he fallen out with any of the players, and how the media reacted to him as well?
He's doing well. New York City FC is a strong team. I think he's done a nice job sort of figuring out how to deal with there's some big star names, Pirlo and David Villa, who seems to be just thrilled to be working with Vieira. He hasn't fallen out with anyone that I've heard of. I spoke with him a couple weeks ago when he was in Texas. He was great, charming. I think the media has really been won over by him and really haven't seen much abrasion at all. The team's doing well. Obviously, that helps quite a bit. So I think so far, I think the biggest concern that New York City fans have about Vieira right now is not can he continue to kind of see the club through, but rather when will a European team come calling? Because I think he's enjoying life in New York City. It's obviously a nice place to live and work, but at the same time, I think he really enjoyed the Man City youth job and would be happy to sort of pick up a job back in the old continent sooner rather than later. So we'll see. So far, so good for Vieira. I think it's been almost universally positive for him.
Do you think what team in Europe do you think he could do well at? Do you think he could do well at a Premier League team maybe in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with the sort of, I think he's shown a real steady hand here with the sort of superstars. It's challenging to manage in Major League Soccer because you have so many players who are big names, whether they're, known in Europe or not. There are stars here, players that are on big wages, and then there's players who are on not very much. We're making almost sort of what an average American makes at sort of a desk job, a 9 to 5. You have to balance both of those and sort of get the most out of each of those kind of players. It's not always easy. So I think he's done a good job there, and I think that could show managers or if you're owners in the Premier League, that he's a guy who could probably keep the dressing room happy. And also, I think that his eye for youth is something that is real, developed. He's had a couple players, Jack Harrison, an Englishman who was taken in the MLS draft, is one of them. Young Herrera, the Man City loanee from Venezuela that did so well at the U20 World Cup, is another. These young players, he's giving them opportunities right away. That's something I think that should be valued generally, but definitely for a big European team, I think he has a real eye for young players who will excel in the first team. So I could definitely see him managing in the Premier League. I think he would do well there from what he's shown in New York City.
Okay, Darren, thank you for your call. That's Darren on 08085 909 693. Another 19 minutes of the World Football Phone-In. We say good morning to Chris.
Hello, Nick. Good morning.
Fire away with your question. It's pretty loud behind you, so what do you want to ask?
It's in two parts. You're talking about a panel there to punish players for simulated diving. How about a panel to punish referees for missing bad decisions and making wrong decisions? And the other thing was, I would allow the owners of clubs to sue offending players who are dirty players, who cripple their star men and put them out of the game for months at a time. Same as what's happened with Coutinho in Liverpool. He's lost about 10 weeks by being consistently fouled. And Jordan Henderson, he's lost most of the season because players were seen to stamp down his Achilles tendon and drag the heel down his Achilles, mate, and put him out the game. It's criminal, and if it was done in the street, the offender would be dragged before the courts.
Tim, how do you want to take this?
Yeah, and I think that referees need support. I think the referee is so alone out there. He doesn't have the support structure that I'm not in favour of. Well, it happens anyway. There is a panel to judge the work of the referee, so that kind of happens anyway. I wouldn't like that to kind of develop into a media circus. Now, in terms of players getting long-term injury, in incidents such as the one that Chris mentioned, when you can clearly see a stamp. Things that would be illegal in a boxing ring, for crying out loud, and that they've got to be, that they have to be, if you'll pardon the pun, they've got to be stamped down on, and punishment has to be meted out. But the general point that if someone is out for a long period of time as a result of injury, then the player who injured him should automatically be punished, I can't go along with, because injuries in football. And very, very often there isn't a direct correlation between the dirtiness of the tackle and the extent of the injury. And the example that always comes to mind with me with this one is Colin Bell of Manchester City, who went down. It was an innocuous challenge, and whoever it was who was doing the match commentary on TV said, "No, doesn't look to be anything wrong with him." Well, in fact, the injury was so severe that he suffered that it effectively ended his career, and he was out for 2 years. He tried to come back, he was never the same again, and he gave it up. So the idea that the fellow who tackled him should be punished to stay out of the game the length of time that Colin Bell was out of the game, for me is an injustice, because there was nothing really malicious in the tackle. It's just that, unfortunately, that Colin Bell picked up a severe injury. So, and some people are in favour of this kind of automatic ban, that if a tackle puts a player out for X period of time, then the perpetrator of that tackle should also be out for that period of time. I don't agree with that. I think things have to be done on a case-by-case basis.
Aaron Dyson is from Leyland. He says, guys, massive fan of the show. Question for both Tim and John. If a player constantly dives and feigns injury or cheats in a game to get a penalty or get somebody sent off, I'm thinking of Neymar right now, and that player is then seriously injured by a dangerous tackle, how would your region's media pundits react? Would they think that the player deserved it, the player had it coming to them, and have no sympathy, or just condemn the tackle? Love the show. Keep up the good work, from Aaron. Do you want to take that one first, John?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference. And of course, we're speaking in generalizations, which can be dangerous, because I think, opinions would vary all over the spectrum. But I think the United States, Hughes, in general, in matters of football, stays close to sort of the English idea, which I think would be, he had it coming. He's getting away with things for so long that, sort of not serves him right necessarily, because I don't think if you wrote an opinion column, taking joy in injury, there's no honor in that. That's certainly not right by any standard. But I think if someone came out and said, you sort of boy who cried wolf, and then this time it actually happened, I think that maybe could hold water. In Mexico, I don't think, I don't know, it's difficult. The Mexican sports commentator is very angry a lot of the time, has very strong opinions. And so I think it's difficult because sometimes I think it depends on the player, honestly. There are some players who seem to just earn the wrath of sort of the general sports public and media in Mexico, and there are some players who are sort of beloved. So it sort of depends on the incident. But I think with a bit of as Tim will probably tell us, Mexico hews a little closer cultural wise to South America, and I think there's sort of a different view of players maybe using theatrics to try and gain a little bit. It might be a little bit more accepted, and so I think a dirty tackle that put that player out sometime, it might be a little bit more on the player who puts in the difficult challenge than the player who maybe goes down often. But that's my impression, Tim. Am I right on that?
Absolutely, 100% right. So I'll take it a little bit somewhere else. I was just thinking today about the World Cup 3 years ago. And when we got to the knockout stages, it seemed to me that there was a clear, I don't know if it was a directive or an intention from FIFA to try and cut down on yellow cards being given out. Because yellow cards in the knockout stages, there's a number of knockout games, and you get key players being suspended by the time you reach the quarterfinal, semi-final, or whatever. And so the referees were trying to take a kind of open brackets common sense approach. And I remember thinking at the time, this ain't going to work with the South American sides. It just isn't going to work. Do you remember Brazil, Chile? Brazil got away with a 3-1 at the start. I think it was Fernandinho and Alexis Sanchez. So Chile are thinking, well, we're going to have one of them as well. I think Gary Medel did Neymar on that one and reduced his effectiveness for the game. And it was a little bit snipey. And then it got much worse in the next one, which was Brazil against Colombia, where Brazil had clearly decided they were going to kick James Rodriguez, and they were going to take it in turns to kick James Rodriguez, and they were going to make sure that James Rodriguez didn't impose himself on the game. In a sense, it rebounded on them in the end, because there was a game when the foul count was ludicrously high, and more fouls by Brazil than by Colombia, and the Colombians weren't angels either. But in the end, it got them Neymar out the tournament. With that challenge on him from behind there with Zuniga, Camilo Zuniga, that ended up cracking Neymar's ribs. So it kind of rebounded on Brazil. But making that point in Brazil at that time didn't make me particularly popular. It was just, look at this criminal assault by Zuniga. But hang on a minute, you went out onto the field with the idea that you were going to commit fouls. And Scolari, who was a Brazil coach at the time, I remember interviewing him years and years and years ago, and he was quite adamant. He was just quite blatant about it. He said, good, well-played football means football where there are times in a game when you want to be committing fouls. And at that time in Brazilian football, like the kind of 90s, there was a school of thought whereby the side that commits the most fouls is the one that's going to win. That's the way that some of the coaches and the coaching staff were honestly looking at the game. If we can disrupt the flow as much as possible and keep committing fouls, not necessarily violent fouls, but just little fouls, if we can interrupt the flow, then we can win the game. And Brazil a little bit, they took that mentality into the quarterfinal against Colombia, especially to stop James Rodriguez. But I think it rebounded on them very badly indeed.
Let's get back to the lines then. Diana, good morning.
Good morning, Seth, and good morning to Tim and
morning.
Neymar. I've got a question for Tim, please.
Fire away.
Hello, Tim.
Hiya.
This is a question my dad was asking years ago. Brazil had a good team in 1970. I know that because I've been reading a book about it. What went wrong when they got to the 1974 World Cup, when my dad said they were really physical? And they weren't.
Yeah, they were.
They weren't skillful like they were 4 years previously.
They were very, very physical. If you look at the names, and the manager was still Zagallo, who'd been the coach in 1970. They lost a number of players from the 1970 team, and the chief one was Pelé, who had retired from international football and refused to come back. Another few big-name players, on Gerson, who was the midfield playmaker, and he got injured. I think he probably would have been too old anyway. Carlos Alberto, the captain, the right-back, who scored that fabulous last goal in the 1970 final, he pulled out injured. Clodoaldo, who was a midfield genius, I think, a kind of mixed midfielder, was injured on the eve of the tournament. So they lost some very very, very good players. They ended up playing Tostan, who was a centre forward in 1970, had retired because of a detached retina. So Jairzinho, who'd scored in every game in 1970 playing on the right wing, was playing at centre forward, where I don't think he was really happy. So that they'd lost some very, very important players. Under pressure, I think that camp got very divided between players from Rio and players from Sao Paulo. I don't think they were all singing from the same song sheet. It's also very, very difficult to retain the World Cup. It's very difficult to be champions twice. Everyone wants to knock you off their perch. But I've got such vivid memories of that because that's my first World Cup. I was 9, so it's the first time I was available for selection.
My dad used to talk about it, and I've got the old Panini sticker book.
Right, yeah, I've got it as well. And my old man, he just raved about Brazil. Wait until Brazil. Brazil. So I was so keen in the first game of that World Cup. So it was my World Cup debut was Brazil against Yugoslavia, and it was really, it was a 0-0 draw in which Yugoslavia were better, and Brazil was so disappointing, really disappointing, and they were disappointing most of the way during that tournament. There were a couple of great moments, especially Rivellino free kicks. And he scored one against East Germany, I think, where that was a skill that in English football wasn't really much practiced at the time, the kind of free kick. So that gave us a thrill. But also I think that they'd been caught up a little bit. In 1970, they were still ahead of the curve. Their 1970 side, I've been into this in depth with the coach Zagallo, and it was like a pioneer of a 4-5-1 side. And the key idea was when they lost the ball, everyone apart from Tostan, the centre forward, came behind the line of the ball. So they were very well protected. Defensively, individually they weren't great, but collectively they were pretty good. They had a good system of play. Fast forward to 1974, and football's already moved on, especially in Northern Europe. You've got the movement of total football of the Dutch, and it was the Dutch who eliminated them from that World Cup. They beat them 2-0 in what was essentially the semi-final. And the pressing that the Dutch put on them, and for the Brazilian central midfielder who was used to having time on the ball, you get the ball. Watch Gerson in 1970. I know it's at altitude at Mexico and so on, and it's hot. But Gerson, he's got so much time on the ball. He receives the ball, he wanders around, he's having a chat here, he's having a chat there, he gets out the newspaper and reads the headlines, and only then does he decide what he's going to do with the ball. Now, Brazil's central midfielders against Holland in 1974, they just couldn't do that because they looked up, and all of Holland is running towards them. So it just gave them no time on the ball at all. And
they were really dirty. So.
They were very, very... In fact... Both sides. I mean, that Holland side were physical as well, and Brazil. And once they lost, blimey, and there were rugby tackles going on out there. They didn't react very well to losing, but they were a hard team even in '70. They were a team who could look after themselves. But that key idea of Dutch football, and the key idea of the total football is, you freeze the frame at any moment, and whether Holland have the ball or don't have it, they have almost all of their team involved in the play. So if they have the ball, all the team is close by offering an option for the man on the man who has the ball. All the team are close by to give the man an option for a pass. When they don't have the ball, all of the team are looking to press the opposition. And that was something that Brazil had never really come across. And Brazil staged a mini World Cup in 1972. It was part of João Havelange's attempt, which was successful, to become FIFA president. They invited everyone, and England didn't turn up. Scotland turned up, but Holland dropped out. And I've got a football magazine from that time that says, Holland have dropped out. This is 1972, and this Brazilian football magazine says, well, between ourselves, we're not really going to miss Holland, are we? Like who are Holland? And the gods of football, they have a way of punishing that kind of hubris. And so 2 years later, who was it who outclassed them, who made them look dated, and who knocked them out of the World Cup? It was Holland.
And of course, Johan Cruyff didn't go to the next one, did he?
No, he didn't, which is
which I don't blame him.
Which is a great shame. Well, it's a great shame. And his motives are a little bit strange on that one. It's subsequently come down as a protest against Argentina's military dictatorship. But he'd announced that he wasn't going to go before 1976, when Argentina became a military dictatorship. So it seems that was one reason amongst others. I think there were family reasons and personal reasons. But in purely footballing terms, it's a great shame because Holland came so close to winning it. And had they had Cruyff, maybe they'd have just gone that little bit further and they'd have been champions.
Diana, thank you very much for the call. Some really interesting points there, looking back on 1970 and 1974, specifically for Brazil. What, though, about the World Cup next year? This is a question, John Arnold, I promised you 25 minutes ago. A year out from the World Cup, which CONCACAF team has you the most excited and which the most worried?
Well, I think that, first of all, I would say in terms of qualification, I'm worried that Honduras might not even make it, which, with all love to the Catrachos, might not be the worst thing. They've been incredibly defensive, haven't been able to score goals at the previous tournaments they've been in, so maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing. Who has me excited? I think Mexico is still the best team, despite a sort of up and down Confederations Cup showing. The U.S. is showing promise, but I think Mexico is probably superior still, just maybe by a hair. But I'm excited about what Panama might do. I think they're probably going to end up in the playoff and maybe play the Asian team in that playoff. And then I hope they make it for their sake, because this is a team that's never made the World Cup. It has a generation of players well into their 30s, forward Blas Perez, center back Felipe Baloy, goalkeeper Jaime Pinedo's in his 30s, Roman Torres is in his 30s. It's a generation that's really put Panamanian football on the map, in a country that's traditionally been obsessed with baseball. I think it would be, just a phenomenal story if they're able to make it. Once they're there, there are some young players who I think can maybe help carry them a little farther than maybe some of those guys whose legs might be giving a bit. But I think just emotionally making it for a small country, again, where football hasn't been the most popular sport, it would be a very proud moment. So I would be excited to see them from the story, not necessarily the football. I think that they'd be okay. Mexico and the U.S. still kind of the class of CONCACAF right now, and Costa Rica, which as I mentioned, for a Gold Cup favorite. But I'll go with Panama as the team I'm excited about seeing in the World Cup. Honduras, a team I'm worried might not make it. Panama, main sport, baseball? Yeah, that's right. It's, there's that American influence, for good and bad, is down there. I was there in November for a World Cup qualification match, and a lot of the football, it's a football crazy place, but I heard that a lot of it is just concentrated in the capital, and that just kind of shows with the domestic league, where most of the teams are in the capital or within about an hour and a half drive or bus ride. So it's something where I think it's growing, but geographically Panama is not a big country in the grand scheme of things, but is pretty far spread out. Obviously it touches both coasts. That's why we wanted to put a canal there. So we'll see how the sport continues to grow, but if they can decentralize a bit, that would be good for the country, and making a World Cup in 2018 would definitely help increase the sport's popularity. Okay, you've got 50 seconds between you. Big stories to look out for over the next 7 days. Tim Vickery.
Well, can we talk about Friday was the 60th anniversary of Pelé playing for Brazil for the first time. And Thursday was the 60th anniversary of John Lennon and Paul McCartney meeting for the first time. What a golden age of humanity that was.
Goodness me. John.
Well, speaking of golden, the Gold Cup continues. It probably won't be as remarkable. We won't be talking about it 60 years on, but maybe we'll be talking about it next month.
That completes the World Football Phone-In. John Arnold, thank you. Tim Vickery, thank you.
You're listening to a BBC 5 Live podcast.
If you like this, you might also like this.
Fighting Talk.
This is always quite random, as the podcast extras are. Freebies that you've been given by bands.
I got a paperweight from ELO.
To find out more about our range of podcasts, click, tap or swipe bbc.co.uk/5live.